Well, the annual G7 summit of leading industrialized nations is set to kick off in Canada with global security concerns front and center. The talks will focus on the escalating conflict between Israel and Iran, as well as Ukraine, economic resilience, and access to critical raw materials.
This is Kananaskis in Western Canada, hosting this year's G7 summit, where leaders will meet to discuss cooperation on global issues. G7 members include the US, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the United Kingdom. The European Union participates in meetings, but doesn't host the summits as the others do on a rotating basis. Canada also invited India's President Narendra Modi, an effort to turn the page after a period of high tensions between the two countries. Mexico's Claudia Sheinbaum is also set to attend, and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky both recently had tense exchanges with U.S. President Donald Trump in Washington. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney's agenda includes strengthening international peace and security, building the digital transition, and encouraging partnerships with private industry to spur innovation. And Canada wants to make fighting forest fires an international topic as well, as it confronts an early, intense start to wildfire season this summer. European leaders like EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen are keen to focus on sanctions on Russia over its war on Ukraine. While NGOs like Oxfam are calling for the G7 to reverse cuts to development aid worldwide. The wild card is the U.S. President Trump has publicly doubted the value of collective action. At the last G7 summit in Canada, during his first term, he left early and called his host dishonest and weak on social media. With that in the past, what will happen at this year's meeting is anyone's guess.
DW's Janelle Dumalaon is covering the G7 summit for us, and she joins us now from Alberta, Canada. Good to see you, Janelle. So we just heard from that report that Donald Trump is going to be the wild card at this meeting. What can we expect from America's participation in the G7?
Mariana, that report put it really well. Donald Trump is the wild card here at the G7. You have to imagine the setup. He's attending the G7 summit that, of course, is a mainly economic grouping dedicated to global economic governance. And it's coming at a time where he's levied tariffs against all the G7 members. So there's very much this feeling that the threat to global economic stability is coming from inside the House. There's also the added awkwardness of the fact that Donald Trump has repeatedly threatened to annex the host country of the G7, which of course is Canada. So the leaders here are hoping for an uneventful summit where they can kind of work through their agenda without any of these big confrontational moments that Trump has kind of become associated with. It's particularly telling that the host of this summit, Canadian leader Mark Carney, he has decided not to aim for a joint communique at the end, that communique where all the leaders get together and agree on a joint statement, perhaps indicating to us that there isn't a lot of confidence that unity can be maintained.
So, Janelle, no communique, trying to avoid confrontation. So what will be discussed?
Well, as we heard there earlier in the report, just because of the timing of this summit, it's coming at a time where Iran and Israel have been volleying these mutual attacks against each other. So that will figure prominently in the discussions in these summits. Now, we know that Donald Trump has sort of put himself forward as a deal maker in chief, able to single-handedly bring the world's conflicts to an end. And he's never put much stock in multilateralism. But analysts are saying that because he is so interested in quickly achieving de-escalation in the Middle East, if there is a forum where he would try to unite the international community against finding, around finding a solution in the Middle East that would lead to de-escalation, then this would be the forum. Also high on the agenda here, of course, is the Russia-Ukraine war, with Ukrainian leader Vladimir Zelensky also expected here at the G7 summit. So apart from the actual planned agenda of the G7, trade, AI, energy security, wars and conflict are going to loom very large.
All right, so along with all the global conflicts, we also mentioned it already, another key issue will be the U.S. tariffs. What can you tell us about this topic?
Well, as I said, so this is basically happening at a time where Donald Trump has launched a trade war against basically all of the G7 members, with the exception perhaps of the UK, where there's a trade deal in place, but it is not a complete trade deal. So this is something that is likely to come up in the bilateral talks. A lot of them will be happening during this summit, rather than the formalized agenda. So, of course, leaders are sort of keen to avoid a public clash with Donald Trump at the summit. This could be one of the topics that sets him off. So it's also worth pointing out that a lot of Trump's tariffs are currently being reviewed in the U.S. courts. It's entirely possible that a lot of the countries involved will take a wait-and-see approach instead of publicly confronting Donald Trump here. So it's likely to remain the elephant in the room, as in not majorly addressed, but anything, of course, can happen.
That was DW's Janelle Dumalaon reporting for us from Alberta, Canada, on the upcoming G7 summit. Thank you, Janelle.